Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Mastered the Mera Mera no Mi. Imagine Izuku Midoriya, wielding the devastating power of Ace's Mera Mera no Mi. How would his fights change? What would a firebending hero look like in My Hero Academia? This isn't just a fantasy. We're diving deep into the explosive possibilities of Deku as a flame fruit user and how it rewrites everything you thought you knew. If you guys enjoy this What If, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other What Ifs in the channel after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. The Pussycats training facility sprawled across several acres of pristine mountain wilderness, its forests and clearings designed to provide ideal conditions for intensive quirk development. As the Class 1A bus wound through mountain roads toward their summer training camp, Izuku found himself both excited and apprehensive about what lay ahead. Ultimate moves, he murmured to himself, reviewing the training objectives that had been explained during their journey. Techniques that would define their individual heroic identities, signature abilities that could turn the tide in critical situations. The problem was that his most effective techniques were already pushing the boundaries of what people would accept as normal fire quirk applications. Developing something even more advanced risked exposure of secrets he still wasn't ready to reveal. Nervous, Todoroki asked from the seat beside him, apparently having noticed his contemplative mood. Excited, Izuku replied, which was partially true. This is our chance to really push our abilities to their limits. Indeed, though I suspect your limits are considerably higher than you've been demonstrating. Todoroki's tone was casual, but his heterochromatic eyes held the analytical intensity that had become familiar over recent months. Before Izuku could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, the bus came to a stop on a mountain overlook that provided spectacular views of the training facility below. "Listen up," Aizawa announced as students began filing off the bus. "Before we reach the actual facility, you'll be completing an orientation exercise designed to test your current capabilities." What followed was the revelation that they'd be traversing several miles of wilderness inhabited by earth beasts, creatures created by the Pussycats' quirks that would provide realistic combat experience against non-human opponents. "This should be interesting," Kaminari observed as they surveyed the forested terrain that lay between them and their destination. Interesting turned out to be an understatement. The earth beasts were formidable opponents that combined the cunning of wild animals with the durability of living rock. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing students to coordinate their abilities while navigating treacherous terrain under time pressure. But for Izuku, the real challenge wasn't the creatures themselves. It was using his devil fruit power effectively while maintaining the illusion of normal quirk applications. "Flame Lance," he called out, projecting concentrated heat that turned an approaching earth beast into cooling slag. The technique worked perfectly, but several of his classmates were studying his approach with uncomfortable attention. "Your thermal output seems to have increased since the practical exams," Yaoyorozu observed as she created weapons designed to exploit the creature's structural weaknesses. "The precision is remarkable. Practice makes perfect," Izuku deflected, though privately he knew she was right. His devil fruit abilities were continuing to evolve, becoming more integrated with his consciousness and more responsive to his will. That's the problem, he thought as he carved through another earth beast with surgical precision. The power keeps growing, and hiding that growth is becoming impossible. By the time they reached the training facility, the sun was setting behind the mountain peaks, and every student was exhausted from hours of intensive combat. But it was clear that the orientation exercise had been as much about assessment as actual challenge. The Pussycats had been studying their techniques, analyzing capabilities, and making notes about individual development needs. "Impressive work today," Pixie Bob announced as they gathered for dinner and facility orientation. "Everyone showed growth since your previous assessments, though some of you demonstrated more advancement than others." Her gaze lingered on Izuku for a moment longer than seemed casual, suggesting his performance had attracted the same kind of attention he'd been trying to avoid. "Tomorrow we begin ultimate move development," Mandalay explained as they reviewed the training schedule. "Each student will work on techniques that showcase their quirk's maximum potential while addressing personal combat limitations." Ultimate moves that showcase maximum potential, Izuku reflected as he considered the implications. "Without revealing that my maximum potential operates on scales that normal quirks can't achieve." The next morning brought training that was unlike anything Izuku had experienced, even during his intensive sessions with All Might. The goal isn't just power, Tiger explained as they began their first development session. Ultimate moves require perfect integration of physical capability, quirk application, and tactical intelligence. Raw strength means nothing without the wisdom to apply it effectively. Students were spread across different training areas based on their individual development needs. Some worked on power enhancement, others on precision control, still others on combination techniques that integrated multiple aspects of their abilities. Izuku found himself assigned to an isolated section of the mountain where thermal techniques wouldn't risk injuring other students or damaging shared equipment. The privacy was both blessing and curse. It allowed him to explore advanced applications without observation, but it also meant working without the social pressure that had been helping him maintain careful limitations. No witnesses means no need to hold back, he realized as he surveyed the rocky clearing that would serve as his development space. But it also means no external constraints on how far I push these abilities. He began with basic thermal manipulation, superheating rocks until they glowed like miniature suns before allowing them to cool back to normal temperatures. The exercise was designed to improve precision and energy efficiency, but it also revealed capabilities that exceeded anything he'd demonstrated publicly. I can heat individual molecules, he discovered as he focused his devil fruit power with surgical precision. Not just general temperature increases, but specific thermal targeting that operates on microscopic scales. The implications were staggering. If he could manipulate heat at the molecular level, then techniques that seemed impossible became merely difficult. Selective combustion that burned away specific materials while leaving others untouched. Thermal barriers that affected some objects but not others. Environmental control that could create impossible conditions through precise molecular manipulation. But that level of capability would be impossible to explain as normal quirk development. Focus on techniques that look impressive but operate within believable parameters, he reminded himself as he began working on more advanced applications. What followed were 3 hours of the most intensive training he'd ever attempted. Not because of physical demands, his devil fruit-enhanced body could handle remarkable abuse, but because of the mental discipline required to develop powerful techniques while maintaining artificial limitations. Flame spiral, he announced to the empty clearing, as he created a tornado of controlled fire that reached nearly 50 feet into the mountain air. The technique was spectacular and genuinely useful, a combination of thermal manipulation and air current control that could clear large areas of obstacles or create defensive barriers that most opponents couldn't penetrate. More importantly, it looked like an advanced application of fire generation rather than something that transcended normal physics. But even as he refined the technique, Izuku could feel the temptation to push further, to access the full range of his devil fruit capabilities and create something that would make his previous demonstrations look like party tricks. Control, he reminded himself as flames danced around his entire body in response to his emotional state. The secret is only valuable as long as I can maintain it. That's when he noticed he wasn't alone. Impressive display, came a familiar voice from the edge of the clearing. Izuku spun around to find Dabi, the patchwork villain from the League of Villains, emerging from the tree line with casual confidence that suggested he'd been observing for some time. Though I have to say, the flame villain continued as blue fire began dancing around his hands, your technique is missing something important. What are you doing here? Izuku demanded, his own flames flaring to maximum intensity as his devil fruit power responded to the threat. Recruiting, Dabi replied simply. The League has been studying your performance since the sports festival. That level of thermal manipulation, the environmental control, the techniques that push beyond normal quirk limitations, it's exactly what we need for our larger plans. Ice formed in Izuku's stomach despite the superheated air around them. I'm not interested in joining villains. Villains? Dabi's scarred features showed genuine amusement. Kid, we're revolutionaries. The current hero system is broken, corrupted by fame and profit to the point where real heroism has become impossible. We're working to tear it down so something better can take its place. The philosophical argument was sophisticated in ways that simple criminal organizations couldn't achieve. Whatever the League of Villains really was, they weren't just thugs seeking power. They were true believers with ideological frameworks that justified their actions. And you think I'd help you destroy hero society? Izuku asked, flames beginning to form into more aggressive patterns as he prepared for combat. I think you understand what it means to have power that operates outside normal systems. Dabi replied with certainty that made Izuku's blood chill. That thermal manipulation isn't just advanced fire quirk application. It's something else entirely, isn't it? He knows. The realization hit like a physical blow. Somehow, they figured out that my abilities aren't normal. I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku replied, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Sure you do. Dabi's blue flames intensified as he prepared for what was clearly going to become combat. The question is whether you're going to keep lying to yourself about what you really are, or finally embrace the power that's been trying to surface for months. Before Izuku could respond, the sound of combat erupted from multiple locations throughout the training facility. Explosions, screams, and the distinctive roar of professional heroes engaging serious threats echoed across the mountain wilderness. The training camp, Izuku breathed as he realized the implications. You're attacking the entire facility. Comprehensive operation, Dabi confirmed with professional satisfaction. Multiple targets, coordinated assault, extraction priorities based on strategic value. Your classmates are about to learn what real combat looks like. The casual mention of his friends being in danger sent rage coursing through Izuku's system, and his devil fruit power responded with intensity that made the surrounding air combust spontaneously. If you hurt them, we're not here to hurt anyone, Dabi interrupted. We're here to recruit students with the potential to become real heroes instead of corporate mascots. Unfortunately, that requires demonstrating the failures of the current system. By attacking children, by showing them what happens when heroes aren't strong enough to protect the people they claim to serve. Dabi's expression grew serious as he gestured toward the sounds of battle. Your teachers are good, but they're outnumbered and facing opponents who have been specifically chosen to counter their abilities. How many of your classmates do you think will be captured or killed while the pros are struggling to maintain containment? The psychological warfare was as effective as any physical attack. Izuku could feel his careful control slipping as images of his friends in danger flooded his mind, but he forced himself to focus on immediate priorities. Evacuation first, questions later, he decided as he began channeling devil fruit power on scales that would definitely expose his secret but might save lives. Wrong choice, Dabi observed as he noticed the buildup of thermal energy, but I understand the emotional logic. Fine, let's see what you can really do when everything you care about is at stake. What followed was a battle that would define the rest of Izuku's life. Dabi's blue flames were hot enough to melt steel and fast enough to track with superhuman reflexes, but they operated on principles that Izuku's devil fruit-enhanced senses could predict and counter. More importantly, they were still flames, and fire served fire, regardless of the intentions behind its creation. Heat absorption, Izuku called out, using a technique he'd theorized but never tested. Instead of defending against Dabi's blue fire, he drew it into himself, his devil fruit power converting the thermal energy into something that enhanced rather than damaged his capabilities. The blue flames became fuel for his own techniques, their supernatural heat adding to his already considerable thermal manipulation abilities. Impossible, Dabi breathed as his primary attack was not just neutralized but absorbed completely. No fire quirk should be able to do that. You're right, Izuku replied as flames wreathed his entire body in patterns that spoke to power beyond human limitations. It's not a fire quirk. For the first time since gaining his abilities, Izuku stopped pretending to be something he wasn't. Inferno domain, the environmental control that erupted from his position, encompassed several square miles of mountain wilderness, turning the entire training facility into an extension of his will. Every flame became his weapon, every source of heat his sensor, every thermal gradient his tactical advantage. Through expanded consciousness that operated on scales no human should be able to process, Izuku could perceive every person in the facility, students, teachers, villains, support staff, and the exact conditions affecting their survival or danger. Bakugo's team under attack by 3 villains near the eastern cabins, Todoroki and others defending the main building. Aizawa engaging multiple opponents while trying to coordinate evacuation. But most importantly, he could sense something that made his blood freeze with recognition. A familiar presence moving through the chaos with predatory intent, seeking specific targets for capture rather than general destruction. Shigaraki. The pale villain who had shown such interest in his abilities during the USJ incident was here, leading a coordinated operation that seemed designed specifically to test and potentially acquire whatever power they thought he possessed. They're not just attacking the camp, Izuku realized as he processed the tactical patterns through his expanded awareness. They're hunting me. Magnificent, Dabi called out as he witnessed the environmental control that had turned miles of wilderness into a single weapon. This is what we've been waiting for, power that transcends the current system's limitations. This power protects people, Izuku replied as he began using his domain to coordinate rescue efforts across the entire facility. It doesn't destroy systems, it saves lives. What followed was the most complex application of his abilities that Izuku had ever attempted. Using thermal manipulation across impossible ranges, he began creating safe corridors that allowed evacuation while simultaneously engaging multiple villain opponents through environmental control. Fire became his messenger, carrying information between separated groups of defenders. Heat became his weapon, creating barriers that protected civilians while targeting enemies with surgical precision. Most importantly, his expanded consciousness allowed him to coordinate defensive efforts across the entire battlefield simultaneously. But maintaining environmental control on that scale required channeling devil fruit power beyond anything safe or sustainable. He could feel his human limitations approaching as the energy demands accumulated like compound interest. Can't maintain this much longer, he realized as his vision began to blur from the strain. But if I can hold it until professional backup arrives, that's when Shigaraki made his move. The pale villain appeared at the edge of Izuku's thermal domain with the warp villain's spatial manipulation, positioning himself just outside the range of direct environmental control. Impressive display, Shigaraki called out, his voice carrying clearly despite the distance and chaos, but ultimately pointless. We've studied your limitations, analyzed your capabilities, planned specifically for this level of power output. Before Izuku could ask what he meant, several massive forms emerged from concealed positions around the facility's perimeter. Nomu, the artificial creatures designed to counter specific hero abilities, but these appeared to be modified for thermal resistance and environmental combat. They came prepared, Izuku realized with growing alarm. This entire operation was designed to test my abilities and develop countermeasures. The battle that followed pushed every participant beyond their previous limitations. Professional heroes working alongside first-year students, coordinated villain assault meeting desperate defensive improvisation, and at the center of it all, one boy channeling power that operated beyond normal human comprehension. But even devil fruit abilities had limits, and Izuku was rapidly approaching his. As his environmental domain began to falter, and his consciousness started fragmenting from the massive energy expenditure, one thought echoed through his failing awareness. Whatever happens next, they know what I really am now. The secret he'd guarded so carefully was about to become very public knowledge, with consequences that would reshape not just his own future, but the entire balance of power between heroes and villains. The flames dancing around his exhausted form pulsed with determination as he prepared for the final phase of a battle that would define who he would become, and whether that person would survive the night. The thermal-resistant Nomu moved through Izuku's failing Inferno domain like sharks sensing blood in the water. Their artificial biology had been specifically engineered to operate in extreme heat conditions, turning his greatest advantage into a liability that drained power without providing corresponding defensive benefits. They studied the USJ footage, Izuku realized as he watched the creatures advance with mechanical precision. Analyzed every technique, every limitation, every weakness in my fighting style. His environmental control was fragmenting as exhaustion accumulated beyond sustainable levels. What had been perfect thermal manipulation across miles of wilderness was contracting into increasingly unstable pockets of superheated air that flickered in and out of existence. Domain collapse imminent, he gasped to himself, sweat streaming down his face despite the furnace-like conditions he'd created. Maybe 30 seconds before total failure, that's when he heard the explosions. Bakugo came through the tree line like a human missile, his enhanced blasts carving through thermal-resistant Nomu with raw fury that spoke to months of partnership training paying off under extreme pressure. "About time I found you, you secretive bastard," he shouted as he landed in a combat crouch beside Izuku's position. "Though I have to say, this whole turning the mountain into your personal weapon thing is pretty fucking impressive. Ka-chan." Izuku blinked in confusion, his failing consciousness struggling to process unexpected backup. "How did you find me?" "Followed the thermal signature," Bakugo replied as he prepared for another assault on the advancing Nomu. "Your heat dome is visible from orbit, and every villain in the facility is either running toward it or away from it." Before Izuku could ask what that meant, more familiar voices reached them through the chaos. Midoriya, Todoroki appeared through the smoke and flame, ice already forming around his right side as he assessed the tactical situation. We need to coordinate evacuation efforts. The entire facility is under coordinated assault. I can see that, Izuku replied, gesturing weakly toward his failing environmental control. But I'm running out of power to maintain containment. Maybe 5 minutes before everything collapses. Then we'd better work fast, came Ieda's voice as he arrived with his engines roaring at maximum output. The Pussycats are engaged with multiple villain teams, Aizawa-sensei is coordinating defensive positions, and there are reports of capture attempts throughout the facility. Capture attempts. The phrase sent ice through Izuku's chest despite the superheated air around them. The League wasn't just attacking, they were hunting specific targets for reasons that probably involved his exposed abilities. Who's being targeted? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Students with strategic value, Todoroki replied grimly, which means anyone whose quirks could be useful for the League's larger objectives, or anyone whose power operates outside normal parameters, Bakugo added with a meaningful glance toward Izuku. Like people who can turn entire mountain ranges into personal weapons. The implication was clear. Izuku's demonstration of devil fruit capabilities had marked him as a priority target for villain organizations interested in power that transcended normal limitations. I made myself visible, he realized as his environmental domain continued to decay. Everything I've been trying to hide is now public knowledge. But before he could process the full implications of exposure, new thermal signatures appeared at the edge of his perception. Not more Nomu or League operatives, these felt different, carrying the disciplined intensity that marked professional heroes responding to emergency situations. Backup incoming, he announced as his enhanced senses tracked the approaching reinforcements. Multiple pro heroes, probably including some heavy hitters if they're responding to this level of threat. About time, Bakugo muttered as he continued engaging thermal-resistant Nomu with explosive techniques that were proving surprisingly effective. Though they might want to hurry up, your light show is attracting attention from some very nasty customers. He gestured toward the facility's main complex, where Shigaraki's distinctive pale form was visible coordinating what appeared to be a strategic withdrawal. The League's leader was issuing commands that suggested their primary objectives had been achieved, despite the defensive efforts that had prevented total facility compromise. They got what they came for, Izuku thought with growing dread. Whatever this attack was really about, it succeeded. Midoriya, Todoroki said urgently, his heterochromatic eyes showing concern that went beyond simple tactical worry. Your thermal output is becoming erratic. Are you approaching quirk overextension? Quirk overextension. The medical term for pushing abilities beyond safe limitations, resulting in temporary or permanent damage to the user's nervous system. It was a reasonable explanation for what was happening to him, but it wasn't accurate. Devil fruit power operated on different principles than genetic abilities. Instead of overextension damage, he was approaching a kind of metabolic shutdown that would leave him unconscious but physically unharmed. The distinction mattered for treatment protocols, but explaining it would require revealing secrets he still wasn't ready to share. Something like that, he replied carefully. I need to collapse the domain in a controlled manner before it fails catastrophically. What followed was the most technically challenging thermal technique Izuku had ever attempted. Instead of letting his environmental control decay randomly, which could create dangerous temperature fluctuations throughout the facility, he began systematically deactivating sections of the domain while maintaining protective barriers around civilian evacuation routes. It required precision that pushed his devil fruit abilities to their absolute limits, while simultaneously managing the massive energy drain that threatened to knock him unconscious. Each section that went offline had to be timed perfectly to avoid creating thermal voids that could endanger fleeing students or fighting heroes. Incredible, Iida breathed as he watched the systematic collapse of environmental control that spanned miles of wilderness. The precision required to manage that kind of coordinated shutdown. How is that possible with thermal manipulation? Advanced applications, Izuku replied automatically, though the explanation felt increasingly hollow. His classmates were too skilled, too intelligent, and too familiar with his fighting style to accept surface-level deflections much longer. What they'd witnessed today, environmental control on impossible scales, thermal manipulation that defied physics, power that operated beyond any known quirk parameters, demanded explanations he couldn't provide without revealing everything. The secret is over, he realized as the last sections of his domain shut down and normal mountain temperatures returned to the facility. Whatever happens next, they know I'm not what I've claimed to be. But immediate survival took priority over long-term complications. Extraction point established, came a familiar voice over the emergency communication system. All students report to the main complex for evacuation coordination. The voice belonged to Vlad King, the blood hero whose presence indicated that professional backup had finally arrived in sufficient numbers to contain the villain assault. But it also meant that official incident reports would be filed, documented evidence would be collected, and questions would be asked about the thermal manipulation that had been visible from satellite imagery. Government scrutiny incoming, Izuku thought as exhaustion finally began claiming his consciousness. Along with media attention, hero agency interest, and probably villain organization targeting. "Can you walk?" Bakugo asked as they prepared to move toward the evacuation point. "Barely," Izuku admitted, his legs already shaking from the massive energy expenditure. "Then lean on me," Todoroki said, offering his support with quiet dignity. Partners help each other, especially after displays of power that save everyone's lives. The simple acceptance in his voice, no accusations of deception, no demands for immediate explanations, just acknowledgement that whatever Izuku really was, he'd used his abilities to protect people, made something tight in his chest finally relax. Maybe the truth won't destroy everything after all, he thought as they began making their way through the damaged facility toward the evacuation point. But as they walked through smoke-filled clearings and past the debris of combat, Izuku couldn't shake the feeling that tonight's events had been just the opening move in a much larger game. The League of Villains had achieved their primary objectives despite the defensive efforts, and those objectives seemed to center around gathering intelligence about his capabilities. They're planning something, he realized as they joined the stream of evacuating students and staff. This attack was reconnaissance disguised as assault. They wanted to see what I could really do under maximum pressure. The evacuation point was controlled chaos as professional heroes coordinated medical treatment, threat assessment, and tactical debriefing. Students were being separated into groups based on injury severity and potential information value, while support staff worked to establish communication with families and media management. "Midoriya," a voice called out as they approached the triage area. "I need to speak with you immediately." The speaker was Endeavor, his flame-wreathed form unmistakable even in the emergency lighting. The number 2 hero's expression showed professional concern mixed with something that looked like recognition, as if he'd finally identified what had been bothering him about Izuku's thermal techniques. "Here it comes," Izuku thought as Endeavor approached with the focused intensity of someone who'd reached important conclusions. "The conversation I've been dreading since the sports festival." "That environmental manipulation," Endeavor said without preamble, his voice pitched to avoid casual eavesdropping. "Domain-scale thermal control with precision targeting across multiple square miles. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been studying fire-based abilities for decades." "Advanced applications of thermal manipulation," Izuku replied, falling back on the explanation that was becoming increasingly inadequate. "No," Endeavor's voice carried absolute certainty. "What you demonstrated tonight transcends normal quirk parameters entirely. The energy requirements alone should have killed you, yet you maintained consciousness throughout the entire operation." The flame hero leaned closer, his expression showing concern that went beyond simple professional curiosity. "Whatever your power really is, whatever circumstances led to its manifestation, you need specialized instruction that normal hero training can't provide. And you need protection from organizations that would exploit abilities like yours for destructive purposes." Before Izuku could formulate a response, new arrivals at the evacuation point created a commotion that drew everyone's attention. All Might in his muscle form, accompanied by several other top-tier heroes whose presence indicated the government was taking this incident extremely seriously. Their expressions showed professional concern mixed with grim determination. This wasn't just disaster response anymore. It was intelligence gathering about threats that exceeded normal criminal organization capabilities. "And I'm at the center of it all," Izuku realized as he watched multiple pro-heroes converging on their location. The boy with power that doesn't follow normal rules, who just demonstrated capabilities that villain organizations want to acquire. Young Midoriya, All Might called out as he approached, maintaining his public persona despite what were probably significant private concerns. "Are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" "Just exhausted," Izuku replied, though they both knew the situation was far more complicated than simple fatigue. All Might's expression showed relief mixed with worry as he assessed his secret student's condition. But there was something else in his eyes, recognition that tonight's events had changed the fundamental nature of their relationship and the challenges they would face going forward. The secret training is over, Izuku understood as he met his mentor's gaze. Whatever happens next, we're dealing with public knowledge of abilities that operate beyond normal parameters. Debriefing begins in 1 hour, All Might announced to the assembled students. Government investigators will be documenting tonight's events for threat assessment and defensive planning purposes. Government investigators. The phrase carried implications that made Izuku's devil fruit power respond with defensive warmth. Official scrutiny meant background checks, ability assessments, and questions about power sources that existed outside the normal framework. Everything I've been trying to avoid, he thought as the weight of exposure settled over him like a physical force. But maybe it's time to stop running from the truth. As the evacuation continued around them and the immediate crisis was contained, Izuku found himself surrounded by friends whose expressions showed confusion, concern, and something that might have been awe. They'd witnessed power that transcended their understanding of what human abilities could achieve, and they were struggling to reconcile that revelation with the person they thought they knew. "So," Bakugo said quietly as they waited for official debriefing to begin, "I'm guessing that wasn't your full power either." "No," Izuku admitted honestly. "It wasn't." "Good to know," Todoroki added with characteristic understatement. "Because I suspect we're going to need everything you're capable of for whatever comes next." The simple acceptance in their voices, no accusations, no demands for immediate explanations, just acknowledgement that he was their friend regardless of what secrets he carried, made Izuku feel something he hadn't experienced since gaining his abilities. The possibility of genuine honesty in his relationships. "Maybe the truth really will set me free," he thought as they prepared for questioning that would determine the future course of his heroic career. "Even if that freedom comes with costs I'm not ready to pay." The flames dancing around his exhausted form pulsed with quiet determination as he prepared to face the most challenging conversations of his life. Tonight, he'd used his devil fruit power to protect everyone he cared about. Tomorrow, he would discover what price that protection would demand. But for now, surrounded by friends who had seen him at his most powerful and most vulnerable, Izuku allowed himself to hope that whatever came next, he wouldn't have to face it alone. The war for his future was just beginning, but at least now he had allies who understood that the boy who had eaten impossible fruit was exactly who they wanted fighting beside them. The government debriefing took place in a secure facility 3 hours from the destroyed training camp, its sterile conference rooms designed for conversations that would never appear in official records. As Izuku sat across from investigators whose credentials suggested involvement with agencies that didn't officially exist, he felt the weight of secrets pressing down on him like a physical force. Environmental thermal manipulation spanning approximately 12 square kilometers, Agent Tanaka read from her classified tablet, her expression professionally neutral. Precision targeting of multiple threats simultaneously while maintaining protective barriers around civilian positions. Energy output that exceeds documented parameters for any known fire-type quirk. She looked up from the device, her dark eyes boring into Izuku's with uncomfortable intensity. Care to explain how any of that is possible with standard thermal manipulation abilities? The familiar anxiety began building in his chest, but 10 months of training with All Might had taught him to project confidence even when scrambling internally. "My quirk development has been accelerated," he replied carefully, falling back on explanations that had worked before. "Late manifestation with intensive development under expert guidance." "Expert guidance from whom?" Agent Yamamoto interjected, pulling up holographic displays that showed thermal signatures from the training camp attack. "Because this level of environmental control requires either massive physical enhancement or supervision from someone with deep understanding of advanced power development." The satellite footage made his deflections feel inadequate. Thermal blooms that spanned miles, temperature gradients that defied physics, environmental control that exceeded anything in government databases. All evidence of abilities that had grown far beyond what normal quirk development could explain. Their connecting dots I hoped would stay separated, Izuku thought as he studied their expressions. 10 months of hiding the truth, and it might all unravel in one interrogation. "There are aspects of my power that operate outside normal parameters," he said finally, deciding limited honesty might be safer than continued deception. "The development process was unusual, and I'm still discovering new capabilities." Before the agents could press further, the conference room door opened to admit figures that made relief flood through Izuku's system. All Might in his muscle form, accompanied by Sir Night-Eye, whose analytical reputation preceded him. But what mattered most was seeing his mentor, the man who'd spent 10 months helping him understand and control devil fruit abilities that defied conventional explanation. "Thank you for your time, agents," All Might said with authority that brooked no argument. "I'll be handling the remainder of young Midoriya's debriefing personally." The government investigators looked like they wanted to object, but arguing with the symbol of peace about his students' welfare was a battle they couldn't win. Within minutes, Izuku found himself alone with two heroes whose combined expertise could either support or expose the secrets he'd been carrying. 10 months of training, and you're still trying to handle these situations alone? All Might asked with fond exasperation as he settled into a chair. "This is exactly why we practice deflection techniques. The satellite imagery made deflection difficult," Izuku replied, gesturing toward displays that showed the true scope of his thermal manipulation. "They have evidence that goes beyond what we prepared for." "Which brings us to why I'm here," Sir Night-Eye interjected, his sharp gaze moving between mentor and student. "All Might requested my analysis because tonight's events suggest young Midoriya has reached the limits of what his current capabilities can handle safely." Current capabilities. The phrase carried implications that made something tighten in Izuku's chest. After 10 months of devil fruit training, had All Might been preparing for this moment all along. "You've mastered thermal manipulation beyond what either of us thought possible," All Might continued with pride that felt genuine. "Environmental control that spans kilometers, precision that allows surgical targeting while maintaining protective barriers, sustainable power output that lets you fight for hours without exhaustion." He leaned forward, expression growing serious. "But tonight proved that raw power isn't enough. The League of Villains demonstrated tactical knowledge about your abilities and limitations. They're adapting, which means you need to adapt as well." The weight of analysis hit home. 10 months of intensive development had made him incredibly dangerous, but predictable. Enemies were learning to counter thermal manipulation, no matter how sophisticated. "What kind of adaptation are you suggesting?" Izuku asked, though something in his mentor's expression suggested he already knew. "The kind that requires combining your devil fruit abilities with power that operates on fundamentally different principles," All Might replied. "Sir Night-Eye, please explain what we've discovered about power interaction theory." Sir Night-Eye activated a holographic display that showed energy pattern analysis. "After reviewing footage from your 10 months of development, we've identified something unprecedented. Your devil fruit power doesn't just manipulate thermal energy, it creates harmony between supernatural forces and human consciousness." The technical language made Izuku's analytical mind engage immediately. "Harmony how? Most people who undergo supernatural enhancement experience conflict between their original biology and new capabilities," Sir Night-Eye explained. "Power that fights against human limitations, causing stress fractures that limit development potential." He gestured toward readings that showed Izuku's energy patterns during training. "Your system demonstrates the opposite. Integration that allows supernatural power to enhance rather than conflict with human consciousness, which suggests you might be capable of hosting additional enhancement without catastrophic interaction." Additional enhancement. Understanding dawned as pieces clicked together. "You're talking about one for all." "I am," All Might confirmed with quiet intensity. 10 months ago, when you first demonstrated devil fruit abilities, I began analyzing whether someone with your unique physiology could eventually handle the power that's defined my heroic career." The revelation sent shock through Izuku's system. "You've been planning this since the beginning." "Planning is too strong," All Might replied. "Hoping, perhaps, preparing for the possibility that circumstances might eventually require combining powers that have never been combined before." Sir Night-Eye pulled up comparative analysis that showed energy signatures from both One for All and Devil Fruit abilities. The theoretical interaction suggests complementary rather than competing forces. Thermal manipulation that provides environmental control, while One for All supplies the physical enhancement necessary to channel that control at maximum effectiveness. They've been studying this for months, Izuku realized as he processed the depth of analysis involved. Not just training me in devil fruit mastery, but preparing for eventual power combination that could reshape what heroism looks like. "But the risks," he said, falling back on analytical caution that 10 months of training had reinforced. "Combining supernatural powers could result in feedback that destroys both abilities and kills the host." Which is why we've spent 10 months ensuring your foundation could handle escalation, All Might replied with the confidence of someone who'd planned for every contingency. Devil Fruit Mastery that demonstrates perfect harmony between supernatural power and human consciousness. Physical conditioning that exceeds normal human limitations. Mental preparation that allows clear decision-making under catastrophic stress levels. He stood and moved to the window that showed the secure facility's nighttime landscape. Young Midoriya, tonight's attack wasn't just about testing your current abilities. The League of Villains was gathering intelligence about power levels and tactical limitations. Every villain organization in Japan now knows exactly what thermal manipulation can and cannot accomplish. They'll adapt their strategies accordingly, Sir Naitai added with professional grimness. Which means staying at current capability levels makes you predictable and vulnerable. The tactical analysis was undeniable. 10 months of development had made him incredibly powerful within defined parameters, but those parameters were now known quantities that enemies could prepare for. And One for All changes that dynamic how? By adding variables that no villain organization can predict or prepare for, All Might replied. Strength enhancement that operates on scales beyond their threat assessment databases, combined with thermal manipulation that exceeds anything they've encountered. He turned back to face Izuku directly. But more importantly, One for All connects you to generations of heroic experience. Previous wielders whose consciousness provides guidance about techniques and situations that exceed normal training parameters. Previous wielders. The concept sent chills down Izuku's spine as he imagined consciousness that spanned decades of heroic struggle, experience that included threats and challenges he couldn't imagine. How many previous wielders? 7 before me, All Might replied. Heroes who faced impossible odds and found ways to protect the people they served. Their combined wisdom would be available to help you navigate power levels that exceed what any individual should reasonably possess. The weight of that legacy was staggering. Not just accepting enhanced abilities, but inheriting responsibility that connected him to heroic tradition that predated modern society. Sir Naitai, Izuku said, turning toward the analytical hero whose foresight quirk could provide concrete answers. What do you see if I accept One for All, success or catastrophic failure? Allow me to check, Sir Naitai replied as he activated his precognitive abilities with professional precision. The contact with Izuku's arm triggered visions that made Sir Naitai's expression cycle through surprise, amazement, and something that might have been awe. Impossible, he breathed as the foresight ended. The power levels, the environmental effects, the implications for everything we understand about human enhancement. What did you see? All Might asked urgently. Success beyond our most optimistic projections, Sir Naitai replied, though his voice carried undertones of concern that suggested complications. The combination doesn't just work, it creates synergy that multiplies both powers' effectiveness exponentially. He looked directly at Izuku with expression that mixed excitement and worry. Young Midoriya, if you accept One for All, you won't just become stronger. You'll become something that operates outside current frameworks for what heroes can achieve. Something beyond current frameworks. The phrase carried implications that extended far beyond personal enhancement into territory that could reshape society if handled carelessly. But there are consequences, Sir Naitai continued with professional honesty. Power like this attracts attention from organizations and individuals who seek to control or exploit supernatural abilities. Your life becomes infinitely more complicated. It's already complicated, Izuku replied, thinking about months of hiding his true nature while training abilities that exceeded normal human understanding. The question is whether the complications come with enough power to protect the people I care about. All Might's expression showed pride mixed with concern. That's the right question to ask. But understand, once One for All transfers, there's no reversing the process. You become the 9th wielder of power that's shaped heroic history for generations. 9th wielder. The responsibility felt massive, but 10 months of training had prepared him for decisions that extended beyond personal comfort into territory that required prioritizing others' welfare over individual concerns. I accept, he said quietly. What followed was the most intense experience of Izuku's life. One for All's power transfer was unlike anything he'd imagined, not just strength enhancement, but connection to consciousness that spanned generations. Every previous wielder's experience flowing into his awareness, decades of heroic struggle that provided context for challenges he'd face. And most amazingly, the power harmonized with his devil fruit abilities instead of competing. thermal manipulation that gained precision and range from One for All's enhancement, while physical strength that could reshape landscapes gained control and application from Devil Fruit mastery. They're not fighting for dominance, he realized as energy settled into stable patterns throughout his enhanced system. They're complementing each other in ways that create entirely new possibilities. How do you feel? All Might asked as the transfer completed, his own form beginning to show the diminishment that came from passing his power to a worthy successor. Connected, Izuku replied honestly, to power that extends beyond individual capability and to responsibility that connects me to heroic tradition I want to honor. The vestiges will provide guidance, All Might explained with satisfaction. Previous wielders whose experience includes situations and threats that exceed normal heroic training. Listen to their wisdom, but trust your own judgment about when their advice applies to circumstances they never faced. Previous wielders with decades of experience, Izuku thought as he sensed their presence like distant but supportive voices. Combined with 10 months of Devil Fruit training that taught me to push beyond normal human limitations. And the thermal manipulation? Sir Nightai asked with professional curiosity. Izuku tested his abilities carefully, expecting disruption or interference from the new enhancement. Instead, he found precision and range that exceeded his previous capabilities by orders of magnitude. Enhanced beyond what I thought possible, he said with growing amazement. Not just stronger, but more responsive, more integrated with conscious control. Then our theoretical projections were conservative, All Might concluded with relief. You now possess capabilities that should be sufficient for whatever threats emerge from escalating villain activity. But even as satisfaction settled over the successful power combination, Izuku could feel the magnitude of responsibility that came with unprecedented abilities. This wasn't just personal enhancement, it was transformation into something that could reshape heroic society if used carelessly. Let's test the combination, All Might suggested with renewed energy. Controlled experimentation to understand how these powers interact under combat conditions. What followed was 3 hours of the most intensive training Izuku had ever experienced. Not just learning new techniques, but discovering how Devil Fruit thermal manipulation enhanced by One for All could accomplish things that neither power could achieve alone. Flame-enhanced Detroit Smash, he called out, combining All Might's signature technique with thermal control that had developed over 10 months of intensive practice. The result was devastating. Physical force that could level buildings combined with environmental effects that turned the target area into precisely controlled Inferno. Power that operated on scales most heroes couldn't imagine, let alone counter. Incredible, Sir Nightai observed as he watched the demonstration. That combination technique exceeds anything in current threat assessment databases by several orders of magnitude, which means it exceeds anything villain organizations can prepare for, All Might noted with satisfaction. At least initially, but the energy requirements were staggering. Even with One for All providing enhanced physical capabilities and 10 months of conditioning, channeling both powers simultaneously pushed Izuku toward limits that could result in catastrophic burnout. Sustainable power management becomes critical, he realized as exhaustion began affecting his precision. This level of capability comes with costs that require careful calculation. That's enough for tonight, All Might decided as he noticed Izuku's growing fatigue. Power like this requires gradual development and careful testing, not reckless experimentation. As they concluded the training session and prepared to return to UA, Izuku found himself reflecting on the transformation he'd undergone. 10 months of Devil Fruit mastery had prepared him for this moment, but the magnitude of combined capabilities still felt overwhelming. Devil Fruit thermal manipulation, enhanced by One for All strength that connects me to generations of heroic tradition, he thought as he felt the combined energies settling into stable, sustainable patterns. I'm not just stronger, I'm something entirely new. Young Midoriya, All Might said as they prepared to leave the secure facility, the power you now possess represents 10 months of careful preparation combined with legacy that spans generations. Use it wisely, I will. Will you? Sir Nightai interjected with characteristic directness. Because the future I saw suggests challenges that will test not just your enhanced abilities, but the wisdom to know when applying maximum power serves justice, and when restraint protects the people you've sworn to serve. The weight of that guidance settled over Izuku as they made their way back toward UA and normal world that would never be quite normal for him again. 10 months of foundation building, combined with power that could reshape society, He thought as flames danced around hands that now contained strength sufficient to protect everyone he cared about. Time to prove worthy of the trust All Might placed in me. The combination of devil fruit energy and one for all pulsed through his system with steady rhythm, promising capabilities that exceeded imagination while demanding wisdom that 10 months of training had begun to develop. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever enemies emerged to test his resolve, he would face them with power that transcended normal human limitations and experience that connected him to heroic tradition worth honoring. The question was whether that would be enough to protect the people he'd sworn to serve. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.